Hello and welcome to Breaking Rules. I'm Cyndi Edwards. This is not our house. We've got renovations happening right now, so I'm using the green screen. So if you notice my face disappear and fade in and out, that's why. I'm going to try not to move. We are talking about manliness today, what it means to be masculine. And this all stems from something I saw online. You all know him. Hopefully you all love him. He's the singer, Harry Styles. I'm going to bring him up. Boom. There he is wearing a dress on the cover of Vogue. And some people said, hey, good for you, Harry Styles. And others, like Candace Owens, said it was an outright attack on society and reflected the steady feminization of men. And tens of thousands of people agree with her on that. So apparently, a lot of mixed feelings about Harry Styles wearing a dress. Now, I thought, who do we get on the show to talk about this? Well, how about we talk to Todd Kashdan? He has a PhD in clinical psychology. He is a professor of psychology at George Mason University. His latest book is this, The Upside of Your Dark Side. And we've also got DeLeon Sheffield joining us. She is a gospel singer, a Grammy nominee. She owns a real estate company. She's a broadcaster. She's the wife of Gary Sheffield, who you may know from baseball days. And she's got 3 wonderful sons. And there they are. What a gorgeous family. And I also have my husband joining us as well. Let's bring everybody in. Let's get rid of, can you tell who's hitting the buttons here? It's me. Colin Trethewey, my husband. He is the father of our Golden Doodle, Freebie, a former prep school attendee, all boys, also a fraternity brother and a big brother to Trey Richmond. So we're going to have a conversation, and we want you to chime in too. First of all, about how we feel about Harry Styles wearing a dress on the cover of Vogue magazine. Who would like to take this first? And what was your, actually, DeLeon, I'm going to ask you first. What's your first reaction when you see Harry Styles wearing a dress?
Well, it's not shocking. It has been done before. I mean, if you recall, Will Smith's son, he's done some photo shoots for, I think, Louis Vuitton and some other ones. So it's not like first to be done, but, it's an expression. It is definitely expression of who you are. I don't think it takes anything away from you necessarily. But it definitely can, rock the boat a little bit with.
And if one of your boys,
I probably would not like to see my sons in any dresses. And I know my husband is probably a lot more old school than I am. So I remember when my kids were younger and they would try to put on my high heels and whatnot, and he would definitely probably yank them up like, no, you need to knock those shoes off and don't do it again. But we have evolved as a society into, what is acceptable and what's not. So a lot more fashion is a little more appropriate, if you will.
So you're okay with if they, if they're wearing a pink blouse, would that bug you?
I have no problem with them wearing a pink blouse.
Okay.
I definitely think, purple, pink, that I don't have a problem. I probably would be a little more on edge about them, wearing a skirt or a dress.
Okay. Todd, you're the professor of psychology. So over 100,000 people liked what Candace Owens said when it's basically, she said, this is what's wrong with our society, and we're going downhill if we're going down this path. So this brought up some fear in people and anger. So why do you think that is?
Well, there's a couple things. So first, let me just state the fact that Candace Owens is wrong. So now let me just clarify. it's okay for people to agree with her. Or
Okay, Todd just froze.
Oh, he's back.
You're back. You're back. You're back.
Okay, great. So let me kind of explain kind of two different perspectives of thinking about Harry Styles here. So at one end, you've got extremely narrow parameters of how boys and men are supposed to behave emotionally and socially, particularly in the United States. So anything that's going to expand those boundaries and is not designed to harm anybody else, it's a good thing. I mean, whether it's wearing a dress, there was an incident 2 weeks ago where, I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a high schooler in Texas who was suspended from school because he had nail polish on his fingers.
I remember that.
There was a law there. You go back, we just had the anniversary for Sandy Hook. If you go back 4 years ago, Obama was crying on stage as he was describing the experience. And what people might not remember is he got crucified in the media. You know, the Candace Owens of 2016, you had Meghan McCain and you had a couple other characters who basically said it's inappropriate for a male to be crying in a public forum, especially knowing that millions of young boys are watching. And to that, I would say is that this is one of the problematic social norms we have in society, is that what is socially acceptable emotional expression and behavioral expression for a boy or a girl or someone who doesn't identify as either. And the answer is not what Candace Owens said, is that this is a continuum. You have the ability, it's part of what makes our country amazing. It's part of what makes being a human amazing. You have the ability to express typical or atypical behavior. With Harry Styles wearing that dress, you know, there's a performative element of this. I think, DeLeon was talking about this essentially is, I'm going to use an extreme variant of what it is to be feminine to show how masculine I am, and that I can be confident enough and vulnerable enough that I can express myself in a way that's deviant from what's typical. So here's the other lens of that, is that you have a powerful person who's beloved by millions. People love his singing. He's a good-looking guy. Let's not be, ignorant of the fact that physical beauty is a form of power. And the other element of this is that we really reward people that express the extreme versions of femininity, almost like caricatures, almost like Disney films, and the extreme versions of masculinity, the James Bonds and the John Waynes. And what I would say, what I have a little bit of a problem of, the amount of attention and the provocativeness of wearing this flowing blue dress, is that by focusing on the extremes, we don't appreciate and reward all the small little variations of how you can behave. So just the idea of wearing the nail polish, just the idea of wearing your hair in a ponytail, just the idea of a woman wearing a suit, I'd like to see more attention and appreciation of, listen, you can express yourself whatever you want, and have the message be this: as long as it's genuine, it's intrinsic, and you're not doing it just to get your momentary burst of social likes and artificial support, then this is something we should reward in our kids and the youth in society. And I would say for the Harry Styles of the world, if you're doing this to showcase and win more celebrity and fandom, that motivation is what's the problem, not the actual behavior.
Right. And reading about him and seeing him more often than just on the cover of Vogue, I think this is something he does on the regular. This was not in any way, shape, or form a publicity stunt, I don't think. I think this is who he is. And I was saying to Colin, the fact that he has the guts to wear whatever the heck he wants, I find that to be the epitome of confidence, which in turn is one of the things that I celebrate about masculinity. I was trying to figure out, what does masculinity mean while I was driving the car the other day, and I read an article where when they asked young men, what does masculinity mean, barely any of them said having integrity or being honest. It was about a toughness, and that worries me a little bit. So, Colin, I want to bring you in on this subject. You went to an all-boys prep school. Obviously, if anybody had worn a dress when you went to school in the prep school, I'm sure that probably wouldn't have gone over very well. How much of a bro code was there when you were at school, and do you see things changing now?
Yeah, this is the late 80s or mid to late 80s. Don't want to give away my age here, but and yeah, it was an all boys private school, boarding school in a pretty remote area. And I would say, it was a different school than most in that we had a really progressive drama program and great art program and everything else. So there was an element of guys expressing themselves the way they wanted to. But in a general sense, yeah, that would I think in a boys' school environment, it might actually get a laugh initially. Mm-hmm. But if it was regular behavior, it would probably be frowned upon by kind of depends on which guys you're talking about, the jocks or the more creative, artistic guys.
And there was pretty relentless bullying as well, I believe, at your school.
Probably no different than any other boarding school at the time, but there was hazing that went on. It was almost a standard protocol. I think at a lot of the boys' private schools, where you just basically you were sort of initiated by the older guys would be in charge. They were in charge. So if you did something stupid, you would probably get hit. Yeah. So which at the time didn't seem any different than just standard discipline, but. Yeah, but I was going to mention, Cyndi, just when you actually just yesterday, I was carrying your purse because I do that sometimes because it's heavy. Your purse is heavy, but I noticed like intrinsically, I was great. I had it over my shoulder, walking beside you, everything was great. But then when I turned the corner towards the grocery store and there were a bunch of people, I dropped it down, held it kind of like it was under my arm, like, oh, I'm carrying my wife's purse. I didn't. So right. Obviously something subconsciously is happening where I feel like I have to put up a certain appearance. I can't be embracing the purse and loving wearing it. I have to kind of carry it under my arm like a rucksack or something. So,
right. Yeah. I understand. I appreciate you carrying my purse, by the way.
Yeah, it's heavy. There's a lot in there. I don't know what's in there, but
there is a lot in there. Now, boys, they get expelled from preschool nearly 5 times more often than girls. They're diagnosed with learning disabilities 4 times more often than girls. They successfully commit suicide more often than girls. That worries me. I'm worried about boys. If they come from a disadvantaged home, there's more chance that they're going to not overcome and get through and succeed and go on to study after they get through elementary school and beyond. Todd, how can we help our boys now that we're looking at all this data and we're finding that they're falling behind? Does it start right after they come out of the womb? What can we do differently to help them cope?
Well, there's a lot in there. So, I mean, at one end, you're right. You have higher aggressiveness, greater substance abuse problems, earlier initiation into smoking, drinking, marijuana, cigarettes, vaping, violence. All these things are more prevalent in boys. And on the other side, it's not like boys, win the battle of emotional disturbances because girls have a higher rate of depression, generalized anxiety disorder, self-injurious behavior, and you've got an uptick in aggression and substance abuse in girls. So it's really like everyone's losing in their own individual way. I think, one of the things about boys is it's not, you have a biological propensity where they're physically stronger, their blood is more oxygenated, they have more endurance. This is on average. They got larger hands, so larger fists, there's more testosterone that's kind of coming into play. Once you move away from the physicality differences between boys and girls, the bell curves overlap so much that there's not many differences biologically between boys and girls. It's really about how they get socialized and how we kind of create we split social roles of what boys are supposed to do and what girls are supposed to do. And we know this from cross-cultural research. And because if you find if you study kids in, for example, in Taiwan and Japan and Korea and Vietnam and Cambodia, some of these East Asian countries, you find that boys are much likely to prefer these kind of calm, serene emotional states compared to the United States, the UK, Australia, and Israel. And so there's a cultural element in terms of we are a high energetic culture. That high energetic culture activated with boys who are more temperamentally active, even at, toddlers and, and toddlers and preschoolers and kindergartners, Cyndi, just you're describing. So when you have this synergy, these two tsunamis activating together between a culture that likes really energized emotions and then boys that gravitate towards being unable to sit still, they're a little bit more edgy, a little bit more hyperactive, not at necessarily the ADHD level, but just more hyperactive, that want to move around more. Our classroom environments are not designed for any kid, much particularly boys, to sit still for 6 to 8 hours per day, be right next to your best friend, right next to the girl you have a crush on, right next to the bully that Colin's talking about right behind you, and you're supposed to not look at them and interact with them and engage with them for 6 to 8 hours. And while your brain is thinking about the girl you have a crush on, just a heterosexual example, and your best friends that are right near you, and the bully, you're trying to come up with a witty response in your head to respond to them so that you kind of, make sure you keep your place in the social hierarchy. With all of that working memory being used over there, you're supposed to pay attention to what the teacher is saying at the same time. And I think we just haven't constructed an environment outside of the home and in our neighborhoods that is really designed to kind of, build the social emotional learning that kids need. And the other element of that is we don't teach boys or any kids the skills that you need to function well in life. There's no class about how do you deal with social conformity pressures. There's no class about how do you balance the need to be liked and the need to be effective, these two things. There's no class about how do you deal with the fact that you want to belong and be a member of one group, but by doing that, by definition, you have opposing groups. How do you relate to them? Intergroup dynamics. We don't have a class where we talk about hot button issues, right? Things we could talk about here as adults about sex and gender and race and socioeconomic status. And the assumption in the educational system, and now I'm expanding out beyond the classroom to just adults working with youth, is that if we don't talk about these things, well, maybe just over time, kids will develop knowledge about these areas and they'll be very functional about talking with these things and dealing with these things everyday life. Like they'll just become more emotionally intelligent with age. We know from research that you don't naturally just become more emotionally intelligent. We all know 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds who are more rigid, more intolerant, and more emotionally stunted than our own kids that are, 11, 12, 13 years of age. Age is correlated with emotional intelligence, but it's not a strong, heavy correlation that goes there. So we have to, if we're going to raise boys that are tolerant, compassionate, pro-social, empathetic, can take the perspective of people that have different beliefs and personalities and looks than themselves, we have to actually touch these hot topic issues and actually work through it. And if we don't, they're just going to basically adopt whatever medium they acquire information, whether it's TikTok, whether it's their parents' beliefs, whether it's their grandparents' beliefs. As Colin is talking about, if you've got a hostile environment of a bunch of kids doing Lord of the Flies at an all-boys school, they're going to pick that up. And so why would we leave it to chance as opposed to teaching and inculcating these really important pro-social values? And so I think recognizing the problem is the first part before we can start solving the problem.
DeLeon, I'm curious to know, are you able to get your kids off the video games to even have a decent conversation with any of them? Because in our experience, we're not parents, but we have a little brother that we sort of helped raise, but did not by any means raise ourselves. But it's really hard. Even when I'm on the phone with him, I know he's playing a game and I don't have his full attention. And I I just wonder, as a parent of 3 boys, how are you able to get your child to focus on you and talk to you?
Well, in this day and age, it is definitely very, very difficult. A few years back, though, I don't know, I was reading something or came across something and decided that my kids, when they would come home from school and they would want to, rush through their homework or get through whatever it is so they could hurry up and get to play the games. So I decided I would eliminate that rush. And the only times that they could play the games were on the weekends. So I said, no TVs, no games. So during the week, you don't have any distractions. You can get all your work done. We can have conversations. We can focus. We can do whatever we need to do during the week without any distractions. So it's not like, oh, mommy, I'm almost finished with my homework. Can I go play the game now? Well, that's off the table. We don't play games during the week. You have it all weekend long. And then by the time the weekend came, my boys are so active in sports and, all these other things that it definitely helped limit their time on the games. Now, as they've gotten older and how schools have integrated a lot of like iPad learning or, just more technology into the learning part, it has definitely been way more difficult to manage and control, that social aspect of things that I was able to do, a while back.
Right.
But that's kind of like I tried to set rules or boundaries as to how they would be able to interact and just be able to shape that time, because that's important. I mean, if they're so consumed all day long, they're in school all day long for however many hours, and then they come home and then they're like sucked into this world over here. You do have, as a parent, have to really try to establish boundaries and to set some type of control over how things are managed in the house.
Good for you. You stuck to your guns.
And they were very angry at me. They were, oh, you must hate me. Why are you doing this? I mean, because, I think it was my older son. He was maybe like, I don't know, 11. And just one day I was like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. And he was quite upset with me, but I think for him, playing video games is not even really like, it's
not the be all and end all.
No.
What about talking
the younger ones now? Because like I said, as schools have introduced more technology and it's in their face so much more, it's hard for them to like, it's like, okay, I'm doing my schoolwork on my iPad. Oh, let me just flip over here and like, and it's hard to manage that part as a parent.
I know you're a religious woman, and I'm curious to know how blunt you are with your boys when it comes to talking about sex, and because that they've seen it. That they're seeing it in a place online that might not be the healthiest place to get your sex ed. So what kind of discussions are you having with your boys?
Well, I would say this. My mother at a very early age was very blunt with me, and she's very, I would say very religious or very, spiritual. But she didn't hold held no bars. She sat down, she talked to me and, explained and went over certain things. And, whether it was the street lingo or street language or how they were talking and saying things, maybe I would hear outside of the home versus in the home. I mean, we went over quite a bit of things. And so I feel like I've kind of brought that same energy to my boys, where I'm very blunt with them. I'm very no holds bar. I'm just kind of, I think sometimes the kids think, you're just clueless or out, you don't know what's going on. So to help them, I'm very like, hey, I'm in your face. I know what it is, but I'd rather you and I have this conversation and we talk about it and we kind of, make things make sense, because I am aware you get on these social sites, things pop up, or one thing will lead you into something else. And now you're sucked in and, you're watching these TikToks or you're watching something on YouTube, and all of these different things are like being presented to you that at this age, you may not quite understand how to break down, or how to, it's like all of these different things. And it might be, provoking certain emotions and reactions. And so I always, really talk to my sons and say, there's certain things that you shouldn't even be a part of, or seeing, or allowing to be in your spirit, because you're not ready to you don't understand it. You don't know how to break it down, or what it is. So, I really do try to talk to them and be as open and honest and transparent with them as possible.
Good. Todd, you see students at college. I mean, not so much now because it's virtual, but have you noticed a change over the years in the way the boys treat the girls, or talk about the girls, or feel about the girls? Do you think things are progressing or regressing when it comes to that, just based on everything they're seeing online and what they're learning that may not be so great?
Well, here's the thing is, when you have, just going back to kind of Candace Owens' comment about Harry Styles, is what I've seen over the past 5 or 6 years in the college campus. And remember, these aren't, full grown adults. They're, 18 to 22-year-olds, an occasional 40, 45-year-old. You're seeing a greater appreciation for, variations in how you can express yourself, variations how you can behave towards other people, much more tolerance. I mean, you just have greater tolerance for gender atypical behavior, sex atypical behavior. What you are seeing on top of that, though, and I think DeLeon kind of captures this kind of skirted around this topic, which is you have a dating world that's very different than when we were young, where it's, instant access. And and what we know about the psychology of choices is you can be paralyzed by the tyranny of possibilities. And when you, this, I don't want to sound like the Grandpa Simpson and talking and a curmudgeon, if your ball goes over my fence, I'm not going to give it back. But when you had to meet face to face with the person, you had to master the mechanics of eye contact, of nodding your head, listening to people, of non-verbals, of touching someone's elbow when they're talking, like, that's a really good point, and kind of, making sure that kind of to show when you have disdain, to show when you have enthusiasm, to react when people share something positive. When you have dating apps, and you have YouTube videos and pornographic websites that dehumanize people, it carries over into the real world. And basically, whoever it is that is your dating pool, you view them as expendable, where there's nothing wrong with the idea of you have a date, you do whatever it is you want to do, and then I can just ghost you and forget about you and not deal with the difficult emotions of putting a nice tidy bow to the ending of a relationship, because this is the gamemanship that you're playing here. And what I want to say, with the hope that parents are watching, or younger adults are listening to this right now, is there's psychological scars that happen from being ghosted and not being able to deal with the emotional endings or the beginnings of relationships. And it's really fundamentally important as an adult to teach people that, listen, this is going to sound old school, but there is a level of maturity and wisdom and just a level of goodwill of being a human being, that if there is an ending to a relationship, you let people know, and you be willing to absorb the regret, the anger, the indignation, the frustration, the disappointment, whatever comes at you. That's the price of admission of trying to enter into a romantic liaison or relationship with another human being. And it makes you grow as a person. You're going to be up 2 ways. One is you can kind of fine tune your skills for the next relationship. And the other one is that you get better at being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And this is kind of one of the skills that's really being lost in the current generation, is as we let kids kind of have this free autonomy to go online and be whoever they want online, there's no rules and regulations. They can abort any situation, turn off the computer, switch the app, change the tab, and there's no consequence. Nobody's watching them. No one's giving them advice and wisdom about what to do next.
I'm worried about their interpersonal skills. I really am.
Yeah. And you become more fragile as you're also the person that inflicts more pain on people. You're also less able to withstand the emotional difficulty of being upset another person. And so if there's any skill that I think is really fundamentally important, it's the ability to challenge yourself emotionally, not just physically as a boy, because we're talking really about boys. We do a lot of work with physical. DeLeon said how our kids play sports. My twin 13-year-olds are both in travel soccer leagues. They get that in kids. But the emotionally challenging part, you've got to work with your kids, and you can't be rigid. How you respond when they're upset determines the social script of what they're going to do the next time they feel those emotions. So if they get angry and you decide to get louder and more angry, well, now they're basically learning the script, which is anger is a game of one-upmanship. Whoever's the loudest voice in the room wins. Well, that's not effective for long-term relationships, friendships, romances, working with teachers, working with managers, working with coworkers. And if a boy comes home sad and you tell him to suck it up and kind of like, listen, suck it up. You lost. That's what happens. You'll get another chance. Part of me agrees with that. And yet you're teaching them to disown exactly why they're sad. They're sad because it's meaningful to them. They're sad because something important to them was taken from them in some way or lost them in some way. And they might even feel a sense of responsibility, really virtuous behaviors, a sense of responsibility, conscientiousness, industriousness, the willingness to be vulnerable enough to care. And when you say suck it up, you're basically saying those virtues aren't important to instill. All that's important is have the mask of stoicism, look like you don't care, and walk through the world. That makes kids, particularly boys, ill-equipped to socialize as not only as young adults, but as adults. And so this is where you end up with, the kind of political situations we have in where people cannot tolerate other people that aren't like them. They're offended easily, and they offend people with great intention, trollish-like behavior. And I think the way to create a better society is to start with the youth. I'm not saying give up on us and all of our friends and family, but to some
throw the whole generation away.
Work with the youth, and part of it is like changing the scripts for what is acceptable for boys to behave and for boys to feel. And I would say is that no emotion should be off limits. So let's respond to it with a little bit more of acceptance and tolerance.
Words like man up, or you're the man of the house now, or the things that people project onto kids. I think that's setting them up for failure.
There's just to geek out on you guys for a split second, there's a term for this. It's called parentification. And basically what that is that it's when kids are given the role of being an adult-like figure before they're developmentally ready. Now, sometimes this is an unfortunate requirement. If parents get divorced and one parent decides not to be involved in their kids' lives, if a parent dies, if you've got a disability or sickness in the household, there's a low socioeconomic situation where caregivers or parents have to work long hours, and a young kid has to essentially step in as the parent role, the man of the house, be the matriarch of the house for a girl. They're not ready. That increases the probability of them developing excessive worry and anxiety problems and depression in their adulthood, and it increases the risk of all sorts of other kind of substance abuse problems to happen there. We have to protect our children to actually wait until they're developmentally ready to have those extra emotional roles, and to prepare them for that, we have to help them develop an awareness and appreciation of these emotions provide information. There are good ways of regulating them, and there are unhealthy ways, and we're going to work through them. You're going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing sometimes, and we have to role model our own ability to manage our emotions effectively and not respond with quick response of that's wrong. You can't feel that. This one's good. You can be angry, but not Well, only when I say so, and not only at the level that I say so. No sadness, no anxiety, no fear, and no guilt. When you give these kind of broad statements, you're basically having people disown their own human potential.
You're right. Colin, I feel like I've let you off the hook for too long here. What is I'm gonna ask you a question that I don't know how you're going to answer it. What does being a man mean to you?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a father that his primary approach was the golden rule. He was all about helping everyone else. So with that being the kind of the starting point, I've been brought up in a very tolerant environment where if anyone looked different or were down and out, we would sort of reach out to them and try to prop them up or support what they were doing. So, but I've also been, I've played rugby, was in a fraternity, which is kind of almost the stereotype of guys behaving badly, and boarding school and all that stuff. But and I play hockey currently. But yeah, I mean, in the fraternity, for example, even that has evolved as well. I mean, it's now there are some bad things that happen in a lot of fraternities, and our fraternity is now dry. It's totally dry. You can't get any kind of alcohol. That probably helps with the behavior a little bit. When I was there, we had an after-hours bar. That's how we helped pay for our rent. But we were good guys. I mean, we weren't really having the issues that you hear about in fraternities. But it's certainly I do think it all comes down to tolerance and respecting other people. And when you see someone, I find people when I see someone doing something different, like Harry Styles, I find it interesting, and I want to find out why he's doing it and learn more about it. I think it's kind of fascinating. So
yeah,
I would be on the side of tolerating acceptance, and and if someone's looking different or doing something different, then learn about it and learn from it.
All is not lost for our world, right, Todd?
I mean, it's been a crazy year. So
it has been a crazy year.
Yeah. No, there's some chance that we might do okay.
And there are I've met some great young men out there. I don't want to paint them all with a sad brush and saying they're all, they've become desensitized to violence because they're so plugged into their games. I've met some wonderful young men, but I do worry when I look at the stats about them dealing with depression and just this feeling of helplessness. And I think as adults, we've got to find a way to rally and get behind them and change the path, change whatever way this is going, which really concerns me. You hear about incels online of men who hate women. You hear about, I could go down a whole other path, but I think as adults, we have to lead the way and show that being open-minded is really going to set us free and be our salvation.
And I think, I would think just kind of circling back around to your question of, what is a manly man? I mean, for the Sheffield house, when we say our prayers every night, my prayer out loud for my boys are for them to be, good men of with good character, that they have integrity, that they show compassion, that, that they just grow into just young men of valor, like that they are able to stand and just kind of be all that God wants them to be. So for me, that's a manly man, is that at the end of the day that, they are going to do and be who they say they are and not vary from that.
Can I add one thing that Cyndi, you kind of inspired me to just to mention this comment. And I think it's one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the show. Is one of the reasons to worry about boys is one of the unintended side effects of the current, civil rights revolution right now is that boys and men have been thrown under the bus excessively. And so, the idea of there is toxic masculinity has become such a broad umbrella term that we're not giving enough space for boys to experiment with different types of behaviors to figure out who they are. And they're going to make mistakes. just like everybody else, and they're going to have flaws, and they're going to fail, and they're going to engage in some unusual behaviors. And we have to be a society that's less inclined to engage in public shaming and defaming people by their worst acts, their singular actions, especially when they're young. Is that young boys, part of their job, and young girls, is to rebel against authority and just test the boundaries of what's appropriate and what's not. And if they don't get to test those boundaries, they don't get to figure out what's the course of action that makes me feel good inside, as like DeLeon was saying, of kind of like makes me feel like a good person, and what feels wrong. And I feel guilty and ashamed, and I want to take back what I just did. I feel a sense of regret. If we don't allow, as a society, boys to make mistakes without being crucified for the remainder of their years, we're not going to make problems go away. They're going to be pushed under, outside of the public spotlight. And that's when you get incels, the alt-right, the bizarre fact that in 2020, I have to say the word neo-Nazi. You get this as a rebound effect of the world saying, as a boy, there's something toxic and wrong with me for me being born. And this is what, people of color have heard their whole lives for the history of America. And now to do that with boys, as if there's something wrong because of the, just their chromosomes when they were born, is really a bad sociological trend. And so I think we have to, what I would say, my request of 2021 and beyond for boys and men, is to have goodwill and charity until proven otherwise, and allow mistakes to happen. Because if you're religious, you're not religious. Most of us ascribe to a belief is that human beings are imperfect and they're going to make mistakes. And we have gone the wrong direction. The pendulum has gone too far for not allowing boys to experiment with kind of who they are and what they are. One side is the Harry Styles wearing a dress, and the other side is a boy standing up to a bully and pummeling them mercilessly because they just couldn't take any more arguments, and they get expelled from school. They get defined as someone that's basically deviant. They get defined as someone as deviant. They hang out with other deviants. All of a sudden, you're increasing antisocial behavior when you thought you were putting a stop and teaching them something. We have to stop this kind of shaming part and do a better job of educating and allowing some charity in our thinking about boys.
I definitely agree with the education part more than anything, because we are in such a culture now. I mean, they have the whole cancel culture. You do something, you don't have room to make a mistake. And I tell my boys this all the time, like, everything that you do, you got to watch what you say. You have to watch what you post. You have to watch everything, because I mean, my son is a year away from going to college right now, and something that he did maybe when he was 15 or 16 years old could come back and surface. And, all of a sudden now a mistake that he made a few years ago could bring him down right now. And so he's right. There has to be some grace there, some mercy for our boys and young women to be able to make mistakes, recover from those mistakes, and also the awareness, be taught. The generation that we're in, even more now than ever, is that there has to be something in place to really begin to deal with the mental side of things, so that young kids are not growing up being judged on this whole social world.
Amen to that. Our time is up, but Todd, before we let you go, I'm just going to bring up a picture of your book one more time. Boop. There it is. The Upside of Your Dark Side. I don't know that it has anything to do with what we just talked about, but if you would like to give us a little plug and tell us more just really quickly before we let you go.
No, it has a ton to do with it. Robert and I basically explored it essentially as human beings, and boys are human beings and men are human beings. We have decided to prematurely discard half of who we are as human. Sometimes, and this goes for, sometimes you have to be aggressive. Sometimes you have to be passive. Sometimes you have to be angry, and you have a right to do that. And you should be doing it. If you feel that people are being unnecessary obstacles to things that you care about, if you feel that, your race, your sex, your gender is being stepped on with, lack of civility and dignity, there's a place for anger. So the book is about owning your whole humanity. And some of them are uncomfortable experiences and uncomfortable emotions.
I want to thank you so much for spending time with us today, all of you. This was a really good discussion. I don't want to cover up your face. There you go. I just want to say again, let's be better. Let's do better. Our boys deserve it. Our children deserve it. We want to just raise good humans, as far as I'm concerned. Stay healthy, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.